Though it pains me to say it, I did not enjoy Resistance 3 as much as I wanted to. The story simply did nothing for me outside a handful of moments and became increasingly frustrating the further I got. I will, however, be positive where I can, and to that end, while I feel Resistance 2 had the smoothest story, Resistance 3 had the best gameplay of the main trilogy. I had a much easier time aiming and hitting my targets, and the weapon wheel was brought back much to my delight, returning the freedom of choice to the player regarding how they handled each level. The level that stands out to me the most in 3 is Savior, which has you fighting through an old mining town, almost completely overrun with Grims, the atmosphere of which gave me flashbacks to Ravenholm from Half-Life 2, another creepy mining town overrun by mindless monsters. I also appreciate the effort that went into level design and set pieces like the early Widowmaker fight and the train battle. Were some enemies annoying as hell to deal with? Yes, there's no way around that. Drones that shield your enemies until you take them out first are incredibly annoying, at least until you realize that the auger will go right through the shield. Then they're chumps. My one major gripe about the gameplay is that when you pick up a new weapon, it immediately switches to that weapon, even if you're in the middle of a fight. Through normal play, this is fine since you pick up new weapons slowly, but there's a point late in the game where you're captured and have all your weapons taken off you, forcing you to fight with limited tools while you retrieve them. Multiple times the game almost got me killed because I was moving through a fight and retrieved an old weapon, automatically switching to it as I went to engage enemies with what I thought I had, only for that plan to be completely shattered because I had something else shoved into my hands when I pulled the trigger. Again, not a problem during normal gameplay, but that particular section. I have a little aside to add after the title card, but let's just get into it, shall we? For those of you who understand where I'm coming from, I know the world feels like it got significantly darker in the last few weeks. I don't have the words to make it better, I am just one well-meaning nerd on the internet. But I do want you to feel seen and to feel safe here, and what I can do is provide a brief, amusing respite from all the man-made horrors that are regrettably within our comprehension. There is no other choice but to keep moving forward, and for what it's worth, I believe in you. Now on with the video. Our journey begins by recounting what happened at the end of Resistance 2, with Capelli executing Hale shortly after his humanity was subsumed by the Chimera. Though losing Hale was a tragedy, Dr. Malikov was able to isolate a protein from his blood and create the Hale vaccine to protect others from the same fate, which, not to be a complete nerd, but the dialogue uses vaccine and cure interchangeably when those are not the same thing. A vaccine protects people from becoming seriously ill in the first place by training your immune system with a defanged version of the virus, meaning it can effectively recognize and eliminate it from your system before it does life-threatening damage. A cure restores people who are already sick, directly attacking the issue, e.g. benzathine benzylpenicillin attacks the bacteria responsible for syphilis and is effective within 24 hours if treated early. So now, thanks to one last little gift from Nathan, everyone that got the vaccine is immune from turning into a chimera. That's cool. What I don't understand is why Joseph Capelli was dishonorably discharged from the military because he executed Nathan. I thought that was the understood risk of being a Sentinel, the fact that all of them are on borrowed time because they need to keep taking inhibitors in order to stop the process of transformation. At the end of the last game, Nathan was out of time, he was no longer human. What was Capelli supposed to do? Just arrest him and bring him to Malikov to see if there was anything that could be done? If they could have done anything else for him, they would have done it before then. Malikov tried and couldn't. Of course, I understand from an emotional standpoint everyone being mad at Joseph for executing Nathan because, oh, Nathan was a great hero and we looked up to him and everything, but Nathan was repeatedly ordered to return for inhibitor treatment. Command knew he was ignoring those orders, so they had to know this was coming. I suppose I just assumed that the military people understood what was going on and would know that there was nothing else Joseph could have done in that situation other than let Hill walk off into the sunset and transform into another Daedalus. This is not me saying that this is bad writing, it's just me asking, hey, what else was he supposed to do? Anyways, dishonorably discharged from the military, Joseph proceeded to buzz off, meet a girl called Susan, and start a family in the ruined town of Haven. He does this even though the world is effectively over, because even if they have the Hail vaccine to keep them from being transformed, the Chimera are still here, and a lot of people have died or already been transformed. In fact, we're told that 90% of the human population is gone, and the remaining 10% has been reduced to hiding out in miserable little bunker settlements. Also, not to get sidetracked all over again, but humans prefer to live in orderly, clean environments most of the time, so having all this detritus and piles of rubble and random bits of scrap and broken wood everywhere, especially when there are children who live in this space, makes it feel more like an emergency shelter despite how otherwise lived in it's meant to be. In fact, you can actually see someone sweeping in one of the rooms you pass through at the beginning, so it's not like they don't have the means to maintain their environment. But the devs wanted you to know that this was a post-apocalypse, so there's trash everywhere. And I can already hear the comments, "I can't believe you expect people living in a post-apocalypse to live in nicely decorated log cabins or luxury serviced apartments." No, that's not what I mean, stop typing. Half the shit on the floor is a tripping hazard. Wee ones fall over enough as is, you don't want it to be covered in a bunch of rusty nails and splintered wood when they use their soft little hands to break their fall. Speaking of wee ones, it's been 4 years since Joseph left the military, which is just enough time to have a wee son called Jack. Which is one thing I can appreciate about the narrative, the unbreakable human spirit, our will to continue existing in spite of everything. The arrival of his child also seems to have mellowed Joseph out. He's calmer and more reserved, so reserved in fact that you might mistake him for a silent protagonist outside cutscenes. How could this post-apocalyptic home life possibly be ruined? Well, it's getting colder and Jack has been getting progressively ill. Concerning. The game puts you through a little tutorial where it reminds you how the weapons work, or if you haven't played one of these games before the third and final entry, shows you how the weapons work, before the game immediately gives you a reason to use them with the arrival of a Chimeran death squad. See, not all of humanity has been immunized to the Chimeran virus, but enough of them have that the Chimera have decided that they are just going to finish wiping us out the hard way, which is what they've been doing for the last 4 years, hunting down the remaining pockets of humanity. We don't have an exact number of the world's population in this version of Earth, but the number of survivors could be anywhere between 150 to 200 million humans left across the entire world. Regardless, we can't very well just roll over and die, so we head outside just in case we need to fight them, scurrying through tunnels beneath the streets and buildings until we get ourselves into an ambush position. It wouldn't be a good idea to fight them because, you know, it's an alien death squad armed to the teeth with a deadly robot marching alongside them, but it's good to be prepared to fight if necessary. Otherwise it would be much better for us to just let them pass by without knowing that we're here.
Sounds like they're gone.
I think they're gone.
Damn, imagine if you had taken the time to actually clean the place up, you wouldn't have kicked something that gave away your presence, whoopsie fucking doodle. Thanks to this completely unavoidable mistake, we end up fighting the Chimera across half the town, and while I get the feeling that the game wants me to sympathize or care about these people around Joseph, I really struggled to do so, and that feeling did not get any better as I continued playing. It just kind of scattershots names at you. Clearing out one death squad isn't enough, however, because it quickly becomes apparent that there are many, many more converging on this location, not to mention a strange storm unlike anything they've seen before is heading right for the town. I can't believe the aliens actively trying to wipe us off the face of the planet would eventually come for us when we're just trying to pretend that life is still normal. Realizing that we can't exactly 1v1 a terraformer, we run back to town, but not before Joseph's wife tells us that a stranger walked into Haven asking for him by name. Considering the state of the human population, there is really only one person left on the planet who would 1. Know who Joseph is, and 2. Risk traveling alone to see him. But the stranger was also being followed by Chimeran drones, so he may or may not have accidentally led the Chimera right to them. Oops.
Malakoff, you goddamn fool, you let him right to us!
Still have the anger issues, I see.
Regardless, there's nothing much to do about it but evacuate the town, though not before Malakoff lets Joseph know that they can stop the Chimera by going to New York. The main tower holding up the wormhole is located there, and the longer it's up, the colder the world gets, and the harder it will be for people to survive, not least of which his young, sickly child. Overhearing this, Joseph's wife encourages him to go with Malikov, because if there is any chance of making the future one where their son can actually survive, he has to take it, driving the point home by saying that she is tired of watching their son die. With no time left, they part ways and Jack screams for his father, dropping a little blue mitten that Joseph will keep very close hold of throughout the story, using it to keep himself motivated and pushing forward. So, everything is set up. Joseph's family and the other survivors of Haven have run away in hiding while he leaves to help Malikov stop the invasion, even if it seems desperate at best to try. Cool. The remainder of the game is the world's worst road trip getting repeatedly interrupted by obscene amounts of bullshit. Firstly, Malikov has a boat that can take us to New York. Sounds great, right? Except no, we encounter trouble and the boat is wrecked, forcing us to take shelter because Malikov isn't feeling well thanks to the crash. Understandable, he's an old man. Joseph runs into members of the Remnants, a group of people who are still fighting the Chimera despite everything, and the only character that actually matters here is their leader, Charlie. Joseph helps them get their hands on the power source of a Chimeran vessel, fights a feral Widowmaker on his feet to get it out safely, and the Remnants agree to take Joseph and Malikov to New York with their now fully powered VTOL. Wow, you say, that's a huge upgrade from a rickety old boat. Flying to New York should make things much easier. Only Joseph has a bad dream about his family being in danger and demands that they go and check on them as if he has the gift of prophecy. The group is then attacked mid-air and Joseph falls out of the VTOL after he convinces Charlie to go look into his family. They drop Malikov off somewhere safer and leave them behind as Joseph picks his way through a forest covered by snipers. Eventually, they come across a train that would get them even closer to New York, but you'll never guess it's not working. They have to help another group of random survivors who they just have a knack of running into, even though 90% of humanity is gone. Wild. Anyway, this second stop is where you'll find my favourite level, the creepy village overtaken by ravenous feral creatures. It's very tense and uncomfortable, and you get the sense that you are being watched, even if there really isn't anything looking at you. There's just this overwhelming feeling that at any moment a million Grims are going to start pouring out of every available crevice to kill you, and despite my criticisms, this part of the game is good, and so was the level through the sniper forest beforehand. For the reward of a working train, you rescue a woman's husband and kill a giant subterranean leaper that they've chosen to call Satan, because they are very religious in this village, as it's the only thing that gives them any hope and motivation to keep going. Personally, I find spite fills that role pretty well. But once the husband is retrieved, he fixes the train for you, and then Joseph and Malikov can get going once again, but you'll never guess what happens next. No! We are attacked by a roving group of bandits who decide to waste manpower, bullets, fuel, and trucks chasing down this visibly threadbare train, forcing us to fight them off in a protracted battle until a heretofore unprecedented stampede of feral Widowmakers eventually derails the train. Does this roaming herd of extremely dangerous feral chimera mean that the bandits are wiped out at least? Does it fuck? Joseph are pinned under the wreckage, allowing the bandit leader to behead the old doctor. That's how Malikov goes out, killed by a random-ass bandit in a pointless act of sadistic cruelty. You might say not every character can have a poignant death, and you are correct. But again, 90% of the human population is gone, but we keep fucking running into people to the point where we can just randomly be attacked by a roving group of bandits. The last game stated that there were about 3 million starving refugees left over from the ruined Liberty Defense Perimeter. Let's be generous and say there are about 2 million people left in the United States who are all keenly aware that they need to avoid drawing attention to themselves. It's not like the bandits don't understand that they need to stay hidden. Their base is covered by Chimeran drones they use to obfuscate their presence, and yet... Look, I know that the writers at Insomniac are better than this. This feels extremely lazy, like you needed to pad the game out and didn't know what else to throw at the player. Just killing Malikov off like this feels like a complete waste, and I do not care about Herbert or really any of the characters that we met in this game. I don't feel anything for their stories because they are a momentary blip in the journey. The only time that I actually felt something were when we had scenes of Joseph and his family, when he said goodbye to them at the beginning, and when he left a message for his wife on the radio towards the end. Those moments made me feel something. Why? Because we have spent the most time with Joseph. If you've played the previous game, you've seen him at his most volatile, at his most hostile, and here we see him older, a little more mature, weathered. He has something to care about now. He has something to fight for and protect, rather than just having his rage directed at an enemy and wielded like a blunt weapon by the government. There just isn't enough time given to other characters that appear in this story for me to get attached to really any of them except Joseph and Malakoff, and the constant stopping and starting of their journey towards New York just felt like stalling for time rather than a natural progression of the story. The characters we help along the way just don't appear in the story again other than Charlie from the first diversion. The rest do not matter. I know the point can be made that like, oh well, you're fighting for humanity and to make the world better, so you're running into all these different little communities of people who are still surviving and living despite it all. And that could be good, but the way it's presented just came across as very flat to me. It felt superficial if that was the theme that was trying to be put across. Outside that, it really just feels like they didn't know how else to lengthen the game other than continually putting things in your way. Moving on. After fighting our way out of Mick Cutler's tricked-out cannibal kitchen and giving him some explosive head, Joseph eventually makes it to New York on his feet. This close to the primary tower, everything's covered in ice and snow, pushing Joseph to seek some shelter in the warmest-looking building, where he finds a functioning radio. He also finds some nondescript alcohol and, between swigs, decides to broadcast a message to his wife, leaving behind Jack's little mitten by the radio before he heads out with the clear expectation that he isn't going to survive his attempt on the tower. And honestly, he probably wouldn't have survived if not for Charlie swooping in with a steel chair to save his ass. But it's because Charlie comes back to rescue him that they're able to fly up to a nearby terraformer and crash it into the tower, because there was no way Joseph was actually going to get into the tower to disable it. This final Hail Mary sees them successfully get a hold of a terraformer platform and disable it enough to send it on a collision course with the tower, closing the wormhole and stopping the terraformation process. We're told that temperatures across the world are already rising. We see Joseph reunite with his family, where Jack is immediately all better, and we hear multiple different languages and voices from all over the world suddenly coming across the radio, declaring victory and survival against the Chimera. Which I understand is meant to be taken as a positive and uplifting ending, but you still have the remaining Chimera to deal with. 90% of humanity is gone, and even if you stop the terraformation process, the ecological damage of this is unimaginable. I'm not saying humanity couldn't recover from this position, just that it would take decades if not centuries to do so, barring no further threats to our survival. I don't know what exactly went on behind the scenes for Resistance 3, so I can only hazard a guess as to why the story turned out this way. Maybe someone genuinely thought that this was a good way to wrap up what happened in the last game. Personally, I did not enjoy it, and as I said, it felt frustrating because the journey was just continually interrupted, usually by running into other humans, even though, by the end of the second game, there were only a few million people left in the entire United States of America. After the last 4 years of Chimera and Death Squads roaming around to kill people, starvation, medical needs not being met, disease outbreaks, and sanitation issues, that 2 to 3 million number will have significantly reduced. It doesn't exactly feel like there's only 1 or 2 million people left in America when we keep running into them. Another thing I found interesting was that pretty much all of the journal entries we get from Malakoff are just repeating stuff we learned in the first 2 games, so it just kept dangling the really juicy questions regarding the Chimera without ever answering them. Anyways, in the fantasy scenario of being able to do whatever I damn well please, I would have gone a very different route for the 3rd game. Personally, I find the idea of humans transforming into a new species or ascending to some other existence very interesting, so I was actually disappointed by Nathan being shot dead at the end of the second game, not just because I liked the character, but because it felt like we could have learned a lot more about the Chimera through him. But after the end of the second game, I would have had it that when Joseph tried to recover his body for the military, what happened when Nathan touched Daedalus happens between him and Joseph. Some transfer of energy would occur between them, leading to an acceleration of his infection. Joseph returns to what remains of Serpa and is put under for some time, maybe a few months, maybe a year, in order to slow it down and try to understand what happened. He wakes up later to find himself changed, clearly not human anymore, but not fully a hybrid. He's in control of his own thoughts, but he can still listen into the hive mind of the Chimera. Malakoff explains to him that a protein in Hale's blood allowed him to modify the procedure that created the Sentinels, resulting in a stabilization of the Chimeran virus. Rather than aggressively taking over, the virus became symbiotic. In practice, this means that Joseph has become a perfected version of the half-hybrid Cloven. The story would play into Malakov's theory that there was a secondary conflict going on between the Chimera and another alien species that simply caught us in the crossfire. We'd learn that this wasn't solely for the sake of colonization, but recruitment, with the bulk of the Chimeran forces having left through the wormhole to fight a thus far unseen enemy. Malakov tells us that shortly before Joseph was woken up, something came through to Earth, a gargantuan, magnificent armored serpent, bleeding pearlescent sea green from dozens of wounds, pursued by a swarm of angelic figures. He grimly corrects his description of them. They are not angels. They are not saviors. They are exterminators. What little Serpa has been able to recover points to a species lost to extremism, obsessed with morality and order, purity. This threat, these firstborn, have been the driving force behind the Chimeran invasion. Naturally, Joseph would challenge the Doctor on the suggestion that the Chimera might be sympathetic figures here, and Malakov tells him that they need to discover if the intelligence behind the hive mind can be reasoned with. For that, they need him. They've never had this opportunity before. All the pure specimens on Earth are long dead, preserved or otherwise. Fighting both the Chimera and the Firstborn is simply not an option. And so, Joseph is sent out on a mission to locate and communicate with the pure Chimera that came through the wormhole. He finds it licking its wounds hidden away beneath the frozen water of the Central Park Reservoir, encountering Firstborn forces along the way who are shown to exterminate humans just as readily as they do Chimera. When he's finally able to stand face to face with this intelligent alien presence, Joseph is dwarfed by its eyes, as bright and golden yellow as his, and it speaks.
You are new. A solitary note in the song. We sought out your voice, but the firstborn pursued, discordant. We feel rage, confusion. You wish to understand why your world was sacrificed. Survival. This battle is timeless. We can no longer remember how many cycles have passed since it was inflicted. But we still carry the memory of home.
Through telepathy, it shows Joseph an alien world, colder than Earth, but nonetheless full of life, with towering glassy spires that glitter like diamonds, their cities. We'd be shown the civilization that lived there, somewhat similar to the chitinous serpent in front of us, but smaller, and their scales don't completely cover them like interlocking armor plates. It was a society of enlightenment, of scientific achievements and artistic exploration, communicating to one another with a musical language. We learn that the pure Chimera are a species known as the Curon. They were spacefaring, exploring the stars with reckless curiosity, leaving less advanced and planet-bound civilizations alone until their latest colony went dark without a word of warning or explanation. It didn't take long for the sky of their homeworld to burn as the firstborn descended. In desperation, the Curon turned to biological warfare, cloning, mutations, anything to overcome the technological horrors of the Firstborn, and in so doing became a different sort of horror themselves, frantically harvesting any world they could for more soldiers, more resources. The galaxy suffered greatly because they refused to die quietly. We're told that the Firstborn are on their last legs after millennia of war, and the Great Serpent promises that if humanity helps them bring this to an end, the remaining Curon will submit themselves to generations of service in rebuilding Earth.
Our Etsetla, our most ancient, agreed to this before my journey. We are tired.
Against his instincts as a soldier, Joseph helps the Serpent escape New York, guiding it back to Serpa. Understandably, Malikov is fascinated and begins referring to the alien by the name of Orpheus, and from here we'd be doing missions against the Firstborn as it slowly becomes apparent that humans as they stand are simply not enough to win this. If we ever want to leave this rock we call home, then more likely than not, we will have to adapt to conditions not of this planet, leading to new human lineages that grow further and further from the Earth original. At what point would you consider those offshoots no longer human, no longer part of humanity? Do you consider humanity something inherent to our minds, the way we behave? Or is it what our bodies look like? Is it purely biology, like wolves, dogs, and coyotes being able to interbreed as members of the same genus? Neanderthals and Denisovans were close enough to modern humans that there's evidence of interbreeding with those groups in our DNA, even if seeing a Neanderthal in person now might make you double-take. Would you call those cousins human like us or not, and why? What is the quality that denotes humanity? Where am I going with this? Personally, I think it would have been interesting to explore elements of transhumanism, what it means to be human, and if clinging desperately to what's familiar and comfortable is worth losing everything to a greater evil. Throughout the plot, we'd see Joseph struggle with his new state of being, expressing rage against his circumstances and fear of what comes after they win. He's unsure if he wants to live like this, and believes that it should have been Hale in his position. Hale was the one who gave up everything to give the rest of them a chance, and Joseph killed him. He wonders if he should have waited, tried to see if Hale was still in there, because Hale could have killed him. Easily, he saw what Hale did on that ship, but he didn't. Hale allowed himself to be shot, and Joseph is haunted by the idea that Hale was trusting him not to because that man, that mind was still in there. Conversations with Orpheus would alleviate some of his guilt, revealing that Hale wasn't as free as Joseph. He was somewhere in between, pulled in two directions, a sundered note. If he did trust Joseph to do anything, it would be to shoot him. Talking to Orpheus between missions would slowly convince Joseph to choose life, to hope for a better future when the smoke clears, no matter what form it takes. To that end, with each successful mission, Joseph proves that the Hale Protocol is not a death sentence, nor a leash to some malevolent force, and this results in others going through the same procedure. Able to retain their own sense of identity within the hive mind, these new units provide unconventional thinking and a sorely needed element of unpredictability when fighting the Firstborn. This would eventually culminate in us taking back New York, traversing the Wormhole with Orpheus and our rejuvenated army of Chimera and humans, and finally ending a war that started long before our species took their first steps. And none of this is to say that it would be a bright, perfect, happy ending. It would still be bittersweet because we had to give up something fundamental about ourselves. But Orpheus was telling the truth about the pure Chimera's intentions if humanity helped them finally end the omnicidal crusade of the Firstborn. The surviving Curon direct what's left of their forces to begin rebuilding, using their own technology and what the Firstborn left behind to rapidly reconnect the world. We'd see the years pass with wreckage cleared and new cities rising from the ruins, technological advancements that bring about cold fusion as a power source, the revival of Earth's biosphere, medical marvels and extended lifespans, improved cooling methods. And I have this last image in my head of a much older Malikov finally laid to rest, the last remaining member of the species Homo sapiens, father of the newly labeled Homo Nathalikov, honoring both him and Nathan Hale as the reason they were able to survive at all. The last shot would be Joseph standing at a memorial statue of those two men, the scientist and the soldier, the sun shining clearly in a pale blue sky as he promises to never forget where they came from or what they lost. And with that, we are done with Resistance 3 and done with this series because I will not be doing the handheld games. Doing multiple games in a series can be fun, you can see how it changed entry to entry, but it can also get stale, especially if it goes in a direction that does little to nothing for you. As I said before, the gameplay in 3 was better than the last two, and was even actively enjoyable at times. The story, however, did not capture my interest for the same reason I hate fantasy stories, ending with, and then all the magic went away. Like, no, that was the interesting part. The bleak, dead, miserable, bombed-out, hollow, post-apocalypse scrabbling in the dust for some shred of hope setting does not endear me. I felt next to nothing for most of the characters we met because most of them have too little interaction or screen time to really build any attachment to. We already know Malakoff from the previous game, there's Charlie from The Remnant, and that's about it. Oh, there is Herbert from the prison, who the game seems to expect you to care about, but he is only in the game for the prison levels, and then he's fucking gone, replacing the Malakoff journal entries because he was a science nerd at Serpa, which feels very shallow, like getting your kid a replacement goldfish hoping they forget about the last one dying. Anyways, thank you for watching, and a special shout out to my supporters on Patreon who are all very handsome people. If you'd also like to be called a very handsome people, check out the link in the description where you can support me from just £1 a month. If you'd rather a one-off to fund my caffeine addiction, I also have a Ko-fi. I have a TikTok where I shitpost about games and ramble a lot, and I stream over on Twitch every Wednesday at 8 PM British time. Don't forget to drink your water, take your medication, be kind to yourselves, and I will see you all next time.
Could you love a haunted house, or could you love